All right, we studied. Hello, this is the City of Morro Bay Harbor Advisory Board. This is Thursday, August 4th, 2022.
Recording in progress.
All right. Pursuant to Assembly Bill and Government Code, this meeting will be conducted in a hybrid format with both in-person and virtual public participation. Ways to watch this meeting and submit public comment are provided below. So you can make comments, public comment when it's open using Zoom or by phone. And with that, can we establish a quorum today? Eric.
Yes, that's me since we don't have Lori. So welcome back. You said we're in kind of a hybrid format, but you all have to be here because the council's okay to do you hybrid, you virtually expired. So I think they're going to re-up that allowance at their next council meeting in August, but they didn't meet in July, so we're kind of stuck behind the 8-ball. So from a quorum standpoint, I'm just going to go from left to right. Member Witkowski?
Here.
Member Vale?
Here.
Member French?
Here.
For Jeremiah O'Brien. Chair Hansen?
Here.
Member Myers?
Present.
And Member Dowdy?
Here.
All right, we have a quorum.
Sean Green is absent, but able to make public comment this evening. Okay, so can we please have a moment of silence? And the Pledge of Allegiance. Cal?
The United States of America, Republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. All right, I'll start over on this side with advisory board member announcements. Dowdy?
Let's see. Tide goes in, tide goes out, tide goes up, tide goes down. Mooring inspections are going along. If anybody can figure out how to make money off of eelgrass, please let me know, because we have lots of it.
All right, Member Myers.
No announcements, but I am disappointed I didn't get to take a swing at the dunk tank at the Cloisters Park. It looked like Eric was in the hot seat there.
News you lose.
All right, and Member Witkowski.
Oh. No announcements from me.
Chris?
I've got nothing.
Oh, well, wait, actually, if Chris doesn't have anything, I just wanted to give a shout out that the museum is planning for the Maritime Family Fun Day, October 8th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and it should be a really great free event for kids.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to go next?
I would just like to pass along the word that if you've been here Morro Bay a while, and you remember Orville League, his wife Jean just passed the other day, and it's like, wow, the last of the waterfront. Anyway, so just keep the League family, the kids in good thoughts.
Okay. And then it's to me, and I have some announcements, but I'm going to leave that for our outreach portion of it. Do we have our liaison able to make any comments, or is she in the queue, Highland?
I am not seeing any raised hands in the queue.
Okay. Okay. So next in our agenda is presentations. We're lucky enough to have... Oh, sorry. I will open public comment before we continue to, no, it says public comment after. Should I do public comment after presentations or start it now?
Yeah, it's on the agenda for after, so presentations first.
Okay, so there we go. Presentations. Thank you. Melody?
Hello. Okay, working. Good evening. My name is Melody Grubbs. I am the new executive director for the Morro Bay National Estuary Program, which has been on the Embarcadero for many years, replacing Lexi Bell, who I also knew as a colleague. Next slide. Yeah. So I'm sure most of you are probably familiar with the National Estuary Program because we've been around for a while. It was primarily a grassroots effort to be established early on in the 1990s. But we are one of 28 designated national estuary programs through the Environmental Protection Agency. We are a place-based program that aims to improve water quality, habitat, and living resources in the Morro Bay estuary, and also the watershed surrounding the estuary, everything that pretty much drains into the estuary. Next slide. Oops. So just a little bit about our structure. The NEP is a collaborative organization, and we're managed by stakeholder committees. So we have an executive committee, which we actually have someone on Harbor Patrol sit on, as well as numerous stakeholders throughout the region. We also have the Bay Foundation Board of Directors, and then we have several technical advisory committees depending on the topic that we need help with. So if it's eelgrass or if it's restoration or land conservation, we have several technical advisory committees. And then we have the program staff. And so our program is primarily supported by annual funding allocation from the U.S. EPA grant. We are a nonprofit organization, so an NGO is what houses the NEP. And so the Bay Foundation receives that annual U.S. EPA grant, and we use it to conduct our program activities. We are guided by a comprehensive conservation and management plan, also known as our CCMP, which is actually has been in the process of being updated since the last version was 2012, and so it's being approved by EPA headquarters as we speak, and so that will be available very shortly. And that pretty much outlines like several overarching goals that have been identified for the estuary, how to deal with increased sedimentation, goals to restore and conserve habitat in the watershed, human use factors, and also incorporating, increasing our understanding of climate impacts to the bay. It's important to note we are not a governmental organization, and we also do not have any regulatory control or powers. And so just a little bit about what we do. We have a few main programmatic focus areas. One is monitoring our bay and watershed. We have a pretty robust monitoring program here in the estuary, and a lot of it is supported and helped by volunteers throughout the community. And so we've logged thousands of hours with volunteers helping collect water samples, log data, help us with our mapping efforts. And basically the goal is to track the health of our bay and watershed through a robust community-supported program. The data that we collect, it helps us understand how the bay is changing, whether restoration projects are successful, and also helps inform what future actions are needed. And a lot of this is reported or translated into kind of public-friendly documents and reports and websites through the State of the Bay, which we publish every 3 years, and we're also in the process of preparing right now to be published in next spring, and so we'll be hosting a series of events to share those results. Next slide. We also protect lands and habitats. We protect land and natural areas to provide refuge to native plants and animals. We also aim to prevent future development on some of the historic open spaces in our watershed, and also to preserve the kind of rural nature of a lot of these properties. Since 1995, that's when the NEP was formally designated as a national estuary program. We've collaborated with landowners and partner organizations to protect more than 4,000 acres of coastal habitat in the Morro Bay watershed. That's quite a lot of land. Here in the photo is an example of one partnership with the Land Conservancy of San Luis Obispo County. It's a vintage organics Highland Ranch property, which was protected using conservation easements. And also what we do, you can see there's a lot of eelgrass in this picture. I know we mentioned how we make money off eelgrass. So we also do restoration in the creeks, the bay, and aiding with wildlife as well. So we aim to restore flow, clean water, and native vegetation to creeks that feed the bay. Part of these are projects like our eelgrass restoration and monitoring, San Luisito Creek fencing project. We also have some plans for addressing some fish passage barriers in that system. Also the Choro Creek Ecological Reserve, which was recently implemented, and Walters Creek restoration. So we have several monitoring and restoration sites throughout the watershed and creeks. Next slide. And so we also do other things to keep our waters clean and clear. We aim to prevent erosion at the source to keep sediment from entering the bay. That's one of the targeted priority issues in the bay. And we also work to capture sediment downstream by restoring floodplains like the Choro Creek Ecological Area, and also implement best management practices to reduce bacteria, sediment, and nutrients from entering our creeks and bay. One example of that is a recently completed redoing of the marina parking lot and installation of filtering storm drains over in the state parks. So we were the lead on that project with state parks and the California Marine Sanctuary Foundation through a grant from the Ocean Protection Council. We also run Mutts for the Bay, which is the doggy bag dispenser program in Morro Bay and Los Osos, and partner with Harbor Patrol for our clean boating and pump out program. Most importantly, this is one of my passion topics, is we like to educate and engage our community. So the National Estuary programs are very place-based. We're meant to work with community members and stakeholders to identify problems together, collect data to inform those problems, and also co-develop solutions. And the idea around this is that, if we develop solutions together, they're more sustainable in the long term. They reflect the values of the community. And so this is a kind of an important facet of the National Estuary programs. Some of the other things we do for education and outreach, we have a free nature center right on the Embarcadero near our offices. We get an average of 30,000 visitors annually. It was closed during some of COVID, but it's been getting a lot of foot traffic in the last few months. We also run a community-based project program that helps build capacity with kind of smaller organizations that have ideas for research projects or community projects, and so we work with these organizations to implement projects, and we help fund them. We also have a weekly blog. We have lots of volunteer opportunities. We publish an annual impact report, and then we also do that State of the Bay triennial, more comprehensive report that I was mentioning. We also plan for the future. We are, again, guided by our comprehensive conservation and management plan. So there's going to be a 22 version coming out. And this plan guides the program's work and lays out pretty much all the actions and overarching actions that we aim to achieve through our kind of day-to-day program activities. We also published a climate vulnerability assessment in 2021 and are working on some adaptation strategies. And again, working with partners to prioritize conservation and restoration goals is really key. So I was told that you would probably want an eelgrass update, and so I'm here to give you that. I just wanted to let you know that we do our Baywide mapping effort. It's been going on for many years. We're still wrapping up our fall 2021 drone collection collaboration with Cal Poly. But I will say the extent of eelgrass has increased from previous surveys. So there is a lot of eelgrass. We hope to have those results in the terms of the actual acreage available hopefully in the next month or two. We're just wrapping up some final touches to that map. And, because there is so much eelgrass, we're really aiming to shift our program towards research and monitoring in the coming year, maybe even several years, to understand how eelgrass provides, habitat for different types of species, and do some other maybe mapping efforts like sonar or implement other things. Restoration or actual transplantation of eelgrass is slowed for now, so there's enough eelgrass in the bay right now. We also are planning a LiDAR flight, which is through NOAA, which is basically measures all the elevation in the bay, which can help inform sedimentation, and it can also help inform kind of the patterns of eelgrass growth in the bay. This is an exciting update and recently hit the news this week. The National Estuary Programs are part of the bipartisan infrastructure law that was passed last year. And this means that the NEPs, including Morro Bay National Estuary Program, will be receiving $4.5 million over the next 5 years to help support our programmatic efforts. This is in addition to our annual allocated EPA through the Clean Water Act fund. So it basically, doubles our capacity to implement different projects. This is really exciting. We've been in several discussions with a lot of our partners and stakeholders. We have lots of really cool projects lined up. We have guiding documents from our CCMP and also feedback from a lot of our stakeholders, and we're in the process of developing a work plan for this coming year to figure out a strategy to spend those funds. So these funds will be given to the National Estuary Program through our normal grant process, and it's going to be an annual allocation. So we don't get the $4.5 million all at once. It's about $900,000 a year. The projects do have a certain criteria in that the EPA wants them to be focused on climate resilience. They want them to be focused on addressing equity issues. And so we will be looking at projects through that kind of lens moving forward. But we have like a multifaceted approach, I think, to how we're going to use this money, supporting restoration, conservation, also filling in some data gaps with monitoring. We've been talking to various stakeholders about potential improvements in how to prioritize storm drains or redoing storm drains coming out into the bay. And so there's a lot of cool projects in line, and I think that's how I was going to end it. I wanted to share that news with you, and so I'd urge you, if you want to talk more about that, please reach out to me or any of our program staff. And that's it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Do we have a chance to ask you questions?
Sure.
If we have any
Yeah.
questions? All right. Mary, do you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question. Is there any opportunity to work with you to suggest potential projects that fit those themes, like to just put on your backlog?
Yeah, I mean, we are a place-based organization. A lot of the feedback we get is through our executive committee, which is a pretty diverse group of stakeholders around the area. We do have someone from Harbor Patrol on that executive committee as well, but anyone is free to reach out to us to talk about projects. Yeah.
Thanks. And I just had one other question. What were some of the key differences with your updated CCMP that you did?
Mm-hmm.
I think you mentioned sediment a few times. Was that one, or were there other?
Yeah, most of the key priorities stayed in there. This was a revision and not a full-on update. At some point, the CCMP, they usually go through bigger updates. This was more of a smaller update that I kind of inherited and had already been going through the process the last couple of years. Some major things that changed. So CCMPs, or this kind of strategic plan, is required through the EPA as being recipients of our EPA grant as a National Estuary Program. So there are some key guidelines that National Estuary Programs need to follow, and having a CCMP and having it informed by these different processes like stakeholder involvement and executive committee is one component. And so, I mean, I can urge you to check it out. It's on our website. We'll be putting the most recent one up there. But basically, it added a lot of guidance that is now required by the National Estuary Programs. Things like the EPA wants to see more performance metrics or milestones, things like long-term environmental results. And so this is kind of the direction that we're going to really have a really a useful tool moving forward in terms of like, are we achieving through these projects the goals that we set out to do, and how can we measure those?
Thanks, Melody.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, does anybody, okay. Myers?
I just have a couple. I assume that you mentioned about the volunteer programs. I assume that would be available on your website that you have up there.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, you can find out more information through our website for different volunteer opportunities, and we have a wide range of different types of opportunities.
The other question I have is, it may be more technical or more of the harbor department. I know we have the dredging that happens every 2 to 3 years. The Joaquin comes through. It kind of stops in the north part of the bay. The Los Osos side doesn't ever get dredged. Would that be something that your organization would have an impact or recommendation for with the sediment research?
I don't know the answer to that question off the top of my head. I do know that we are on the listserv for dredging operations and get reports, but I'm unsure of the history on why it's stopped there and,
Thank you. Yeah.
and the reasoning. Yeah.
I just mentioned the sediment and the LIDAR.
It could be sediment. Yeah, sediment. It could, state parks might have a
Fair enough.
stake in that,
Yeah.
decision as well. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, thanks. That's all I have. Thank you.
Member Dowdy?
Yes, I have a question. Due to your additional federal funding, is some of that funding going to go towards your educational
Yeah.
programs?
Yes, especially coming out of, 2 years of COVID and pandemic, I think a lot of environmental education programs took a hit in this area. And so we're really excited to start to ramp that up, make improvements to our nature center, but also figure out ways we can support local environmental education groups like the camps that bring kids out to the Bay and help them with their kind of programming and, seeing if they're really teaching, kids about the Bay and how we can connect them to good curriculum and really help improve those experiences.
So would some of that funding go towards your grant proposals?
Like what?
Will people submit proposals for grants?
I'm not sure about this funding. We haven't thought that far through with that particular, but there's plenty of funding for our community grants program. Part of this is also capacity and administrating, grants and managing grants like that. But our community projects program isn't going anywhere, and that we have secured funding for that program for many years.
Okay, I do have a question. I know that NEP is more into the monitoring aspect, but I know that with eelgrass up and down the coast of California had significant impacts in decrease, and now they've been on the increase. Do you know if there were any state or federal regulations that possibly went into effect in the last 5 years that could have made it possible for the return or the increase in eelgrass? Have you guys noted that at all?
The eelgrass is considered a protected, habitat in general, and it is vital nursery for a lot of different fish species and wildlife. So I know, at least from the state guidance, they're very concerned with eelgrass and eelgrass habitats in general. Eelgrass is considered an indicator species. It's really reflective of sensitive to water quality. And so, I would say the increase in eelgrass is a good thing. It means that likely the water is good quality. There was also a bunch of different factors that we were investigating with researchers in Cal Poly and also other organizations throughout the state when there was eelgrass on the decline, things like wasting disease and, competition with macroalgae, which there's actually a lot of algae in the Bay right now. At least that's the reports that we're getting through, kayak or our staff kayaking and doing monitoring. And so regulation, per se, I don't know if there's a correlation there or a link with the increase in eelgrass, only that it is considered important species and habitat for a lot of agencies.
Yeah, I just know that it decreased and nobody could really figure out why it was. So at least with the monitoring that has happened from when it was at higher levels to when it's down, and now we're back getting up into the higher levels, that we don't repeat whatever it is,
Totally, yeah.
try our best to isolate what has happened, either through regulations or farming, what they're allowed to do. It would be nice to have a little bit more of an idea about how that came to be and how we can prevent it. But okay, I did have a question about, because you guys do a lot of education. Have you thought about how you would measure the benefit when you're talking about education? You said that the money needs to be used towards education, which I would be definitely 100% behind, but have you found any ways to measure that would make them accept more educational aspects in Morro Bay?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily about getting approval for these projects. There's lots of ways, I think, to measure success of different programs. It's maybe more straightforward when you're measuring something physical or putting a sonde water quality equipment in the water. But measuring the impact with people is also important. There's a lot of different ways to do this. Sometimes something as simple as a zip code can give you a lot of information on where people are coming from, or the kind of neighborhoods that these kids are coming from. That's also a good metric. Counts. We have a counter in our nature center. You kind of walk through and we can measure counts, although that doesn't give us kind of the in-depth, demographic data sometimes we're looking for. There's also a variety of different tools out there published through the state, CalEnviroscreen, that start to take different environmental parameters, but also combine those with kind of census data to inform, what's going on in different communities. Age group and types of, what schools we're going for, or what the demographics of different schools are is also another indicator. One thing that we're trying to ramp up is really taking multiple approaches towards education, not just through our nature center, not just through supporting on the ground activities where they're needed, like if we need like school bus transportation, costs to get more kids out to these camps. We're in discussions with things like that, but we're also exploring more impactful potential projects like teacher training in the estuary, using the estuary as like a living laboratory. And there are ways to measure the impact of those. There's several different indicators. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but it is something that we hope to, measure and report out.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Eric, should I, when they do a presentation, in the public comment is right after it, is there any nobody gets to ask any questions from the public comment?
No, typically not public comment on the presentation.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I really appreciated your presentations, and we all did. Thank you.
Thank you. And please reach out if you have any follow-up.
Wonderful. All right, and on that note, we'll open up public comment. We can take the audience that we have here live right now. Is there anyone who's wishing to make a public comment? Seeing none, I will ask Highland, do we have anyone in the queue with their hand raised?
Thank you, Chair. We have a raised hand from Sean Green.
All right, please bring him on.
All right, thank you very much. So this is Sean Green. I am normally a member of the Harbor Advisory Board, but the City Council, like Eric mentioned, hadn't renewed the Zoom in option. I got in super late to San Jose from 10 weeks in Asia. So I walked dozens of waterfronts and jotted down a lot of different ideas. What the National Estuary Program does, what the Maritime Museum does, what our increasing informational signage does a lot to add to the waterfront experience, puts us closer to the top of those waterfronts that I walked, and really improves the experience. So I just wanted to mention that. I'll make a couple quick little plugs for Planning Commission items or planning related items just to have on people's radar. There is on August 10th at 5 p.m. at the Vets Hall a planning permit process information session That's for anyone interested in development at all in the city of Morro Bay. Again, on August 10th from 5 to 6:30 p.m. It's just a general information session, probably a Q&A as well for any potential projects that developers and property owners are interested in putting forward, not any specific project that has been proposed for the city. Another item, the adoption hearing draft of the updated zoning code is on Plan Morro Bay's website. This is a pretty big deal for the city. It's part of the new general plan. It's a big item that will likely appear in front of council maybe in September. Well, it seems like the schedule, but on August 16th is when the Planning Commission will take a look at the updated zoning code. So that updated zoning code is available on the city website, and you can look at it now. If you have any public comments that you want to send in or make at the August 16th Planning Commission meeting, you should go ahead and take a look at that, because that does govern our future zoning probably for the next 25 years or so. And then the last thing I'll mention is actually more as a member of the public. Our agendas for the Harbor Advisory Board, and likely the other advisory boards and council as well, say that members of the public may watch the meeting by logging on to Zoom using the information provided. But just this is my first time doing it on Zoom this way. You can't actually watch the meeting. You can get an audio of the meeting and a static picture of Morro Rock, so you can't actually see the Harbor Advisory Board, nor can you see any of the slides for presentation. So that's maybe just a plug for the city and AGP taking a peek at that. Oh, there we go. Maybe it was just someone just pressed the button that I can see it now. So that really makes the public experience a lot better from the public side. So anyway, thank you very much for letting me make those comments as a member of the public, and my apologies for my absence as a member of the Harbor Advisory Board.
Wow, Sean, you did perfect. Did you have like a watch over there or something? That was exactly 3 minutes. Well, thank you very much. Okay, Highland, do we have anybody else in the queue for public comment online?
Thank you, Chair. We have no more raised hands in the queue.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, so next up we have the consent calendar, which includes the approval of minutes from August 4th, 2022, and we have the Harbor Department status report. Would anyone like to pull either A1 or A2 from the board?
I just want to point out a typo in that. Obviously, we're not approving the August 4th minutes, because that's
I just read it. Okay.
Got a little ahead of ourselves, so it's the, I think it's the June minutes, because we didn't have a meeting in July.
Wow. Yeah, okay.
I'd like to pull the Harbor Department status report, A2.
Okay, we'll pull that. And Eric, would you like to, do you want her just to ask a question, or do you want to go over the status report and then have her ask a question?
Either way, if she wants to ask her questions, or
Is it just a question, or
Yeah,
do you want
I
him
just
to?
have a question.
Okay,
on it.
so I don't think we need to pull the whole report for Eric to go over, Endersby. Go with questions.
Great. I just had a question. Have you observed, as the from Harbor Patrol, an increase with drug-related incidents or calls at all on the waterfront?
well, with the increase in homelessness over the last few years, I think those types of calls tend to go with that. We have been working more closely with our police department. Our police department's got an assigned officer now that's got the waterfront beat, waterfront and Main Street, so he's focusing a little more on the waterfront, so we're working a little more closely. But, we typically don't get directly involved in those kind of incidents or happenings. But, medical aids is typically what we get involved with. If it's some kind of an enforcement issue involving drug activity, we pass it on to the police department, because we're not trained or equipped to deal with that stuff.
Thanks.
Anyone else have any questions in regards to the status report? Would anybody like to make a motion to approve the 2 items as reported?
I move we approve both items.
Any seconds?
I will second that.
All right. As Lori would say, move to accept. And we
I
can
guess I need to
open.
do a roll call vote on that since we're hybrid.
What?
I need to do a roll call vote on the,
Oh, okay.
because we're hybrid, you got to make it a
Okay.
matter of the record.
Go for it.
I'm just going to go left to right again. Member Witkowski,
Yes.
Member Vale,
Yes.
Member French,
Yes.
Chair Hansen,
Yes.
Member Myers,
Yes.
Member Dottie.
Yes.
All right, motion passes unanimously.
Okay. Do I need to open public comment for that now? I think I do. Do I?
Is that a question?
Public comment for that?
Yeah, you should open public comment.
Okay,
on-
so we're opening public comment for consent calendar. Anybody in the side? Seeing none. Highland, do we have anybody in the queue?
Thank you, Chair. We have no raised hands in the queue.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving forward to business items. We have the first one, B1, which is update from the Parking Management Paid Parking Ad Hoc Committee on committee's recent activities, as well as a staff update on the status of proposed paid parking pilot program. Eric, would you like to start that?
I don't know, Cal, you want to take it off?
Well, the only information I had was Scott Collins pointed me in your direction. Just a little bit of history from the HAB side, and I'll turn it over to you, is that earlier in the year, the HAB did have an ad hoc committee. We did a lot of research specifically around parking in and around the Embarcadero, how it impact the various stakeholders, the business owners, liveaboards, tourism. Did do a white paper. We published that. It was given to the Walker study. While that Walker study come up, we also recommended they look at parking in and around the Rock, more not from a parking management, but strictly from a revenue perspective. They did take that under consideration, and we've been waiting patiently to see the Walker report, and I guess it's being delivered to the city, and I think, Eric, you have some details on that.
Yeah, so thank you. So yeah, so as we know, Walker Consultants did a demand study a year and a half ago now, but and based on that, the council is directed to move forward on bringing a proposal for a paid parking program on the waterfront forward for council consideration. Where we are in process on that is Walker is finalizing their proposal for the paid parking study area. They met with staff a couple of weeks ago and went over some of the finer points and made sure that the information they're looking at was accurate. That draft proposal will likely get to the subcommittee, the ad hoc subcommittee for that, sometime this month, hopefully in August, and then it'll get routed, and get input from the subcommittee, and we'll see if any changes come out of it. But then that'll get routed to the different advisory boards and bodies. Most likely starting with the Harbor Advisory Board. Obviously, September will be the first opportunity for that. We'll see if that comes true. Eventually, it needs to get to the Planning Commission for their recommendation. And while the city doesn't issue its own coastal development permits to itself, if paid parking were implemented, a coastal development permit from the Coastal Commission would have to be obtained. So they'll route it through the Planning Commission to get PC's input and recommendation, and eventually go to the City Council and see where the City Council wants to go with it. We're anticipating, late fall, early winter for that. Sometime hopefully start getting towards the council sometime this calendar year, before the beginning of the year, for the council to look at it and decide on what their final decision on it might be. So what what Walker's been looking at and what the city staff have been looking at is, what the proposed pilot area might be, what the IDing what the pay and free areas might be, pricing, on season, high demand, low demand, that sort of thing. Any other special accommodations? I know the committee looked at a number of things, and the Harbor Advisory Board a couple of years ago, when it looked at paid parking, it had several issues that it identified as needing to be addressed. A couple examples are liveaboards and our slip holders that are down there all the time and their needs. So, how do those sorts of things get accommodated? So all those things are being looked at, and we'll kind of get into the sausage making machine, and we'll see what comes out at the end.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I'm excited to see it. We kind of did a lot of research earlier this year, so it's nice to see that kind of finally come back around. So to see if we want to keep the same ad hoc committee in place that we had for the parking?
Right, well, I'd assume so, but wouldn't it just continue?
Yeah, I think it still exists. I don't think, some people may be added to it. Once we get it to it, we're working with the city manager on that and see if we want to add any other bodies to that.
Okay.
If that makes any sense. But yeah, I think the same folks.
Yeah, I was thinking the team that we had here plus the outreach that we had from Val and others, we might revisit some of that.
Right,
While
and
we talk to them.
when it gets back up and running, we might have different members too.
Yeah.
So, and that happens at the beginning of the year, so
Okay.
reassess that, the members on that in January, since it might take a while before
Yeah.
it comes back around.
Sure.
Okay.
That's so.
Anybody have any questions, members, board members? Oh, Daddy.
Yes, I have a parking-related question. Several leasehold owners have asked me, because parking is such a premier, to be able to get a space on the Bayfront Street end, between Anderson Inn and the Hofbrau, there are signs that are on the south side that state that this public parking is restricted to the Anderson Inn guest only. I'm just curious, how is that possible?
Because those aren't public parking spaces, those are on the lease site.
The lease site is into the street then.
The lease site extends out into those parking spaces.
Amazing. Okay.
Yeah, if you look at the lease lines, that building was set back a ways, and those 3 spaces, I think, there, because there's a big planter or something there, 3 or 4 spaces there, they're physically inside the lease site.
Well, that answers the question.
All right, any other questions? Can open it for public comment. Seeing none in the audience tonight. And Highland, do we have anybody with their hand raised in the queue?
Actually, I have a question.
Oh, sorry. Should I finish? Oh, because I have public comment opened.
Go ahead.
Highland, any other comments from the,
Thank you, Chair. We have a raised hand from Sean Green.
okay, let's have Sean's public comment.
I just wanted to follow up on Jean's question. That lease site, the lease site does extend to the south side of that property. I'm not sure those 2 parking spaces that are being used as parking spaces are designated parking spaces on that lease site. I do know that there used to be coastal access signage on that wall to indicate that 10-foot, no, it's probably a 20-foot wide corridor was coastal access, and those signs came down. Those signs came down about a year or 2 ago. I haven't done any research on it, but it seems like what formerly was coastal access is now maybe a little bit more narrow than it used to be.
Okay, Highland, any other raised hands in the queue?
Thank you, Chair. There are no more raised hands in the queue.
All right. Closing public comment.
Yeah, it's along the same lines. And that is further down the Embarcadero, we have our electric bike collection, which typically takes up at least an entire parking space on the Embarcadero itself with a dozen bikes. They're rental bikes. This is a leaseholder or whatever taking advantage of the parking space in front of their store. And I just wondered, how'd that happen? Is there a permit for that, or is this just leaseholders or renters doing what they want?
To my knowledge, there's no permit for that. That has been a code enforcement challenge we've been working with code enforcement on.
Okay.
Trying
Thank
to
you.
solve that. Yeah, it's just spillover is what's happening.
Okay, so should we have a motion to accept the update as is?
Sure, I'll put forward a motion to accept and receive and file this update.
A second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All right, you want to do a vote?
Sure. Member Witkowski.
Yes.
Member Vale.
Yes.
Member French.
Yes.
Member Henson. Chair Henson, sorry. Member Myers.
Yes.
Member Dowdy.
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Okay, wonderful. Moving on to business item B2, update from the Marine Services Ad Hoc Committee on committee's recent activities. This, the chair of this committee is Chris.
Yes. Haven't done a thing. June and July were the months that all of the relatives decided to come to Morro Bay and Los Osos to get out of the heat wherever they lived. I've been sleeping in a closet. However, I have some great ideas of other avenues to attack in terms of marine services and to get a closer pulse as to what other services out there that I have not talked to yet, and I'll get back on it and report next month.
Okay. Oh, yes. You're the right.
Yeah, the other item that Chris and I talked about, and Eric, some of your advice on this one is we'd kind of like to sort of, have a deliverable at the end and maybe just say this is the marine services that exist out there today, the guys that drive in the truck or the small boat yard, possibility of dragging your boat out into the parking lot, and kind of just sort of wrap that up. We still have the dream of the boat yard, but of course we know that's not really possible, but maybe even put in a trigger to revisit that, say if the intake building becomes available or there's some change with Measure D, that may be a time to revisit that. I don't know if that would make sense and just have that as a, like a short 5-page paper or something, 3-page paper.
Yeah, I think the committee could put something like that together if that's its.
Kind of sort of wraps it up a little bit.
Yeah. Some sort of an endpoint or something to. Yeah.
Okay.
That sounds reasonable.
So is what I'm understanding is like maybe at the next meeting before you come to the meeting that you meet with staff to come up with some deliverables and things that you want to work on so it passes it by us at the next meeting?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about.
That sounds good.
Chris and I talked about it, never got to it over summer vacation, but.
Yeah, I would say that if not next meeting, certainly the meeting after that.
Yeah, we should have a draft ready
Exactly. Yeah.
and circulate it around, and maybe, like say, the meeting in September is, get it all signed off.
Sounds good. Okay. Does any members have any questions about the update? Nope. Seeing none. Any public comment? Seeing none in the audience. Highland, any raised hands in the queue for item B2?
Thank you, Chair. We have no raised hands in the queue.
All right. And do I have a motion
to receive and file the oral report? Second it, somebody?
Somebody second?
I second it.
All right. There we go. And
All right, moving second. I'm going to go the opposite direction. Member Dowdy.
Yes.
Member Myers.
Yes.
Chair Hansen.
yes.
Member French.
Yes.
Member Vale.
Yes.
Member Witkowski.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right. Moving on to business item B3, update from the Finance and Budget Ad Hoc Committee on committee's recent activities. And Member Witkowski?
Yeah, so we, over the break, were kind of just going back and forth mostly on like what are our top priorities and where do we kind of dedicate our attention next. I think two of the things that I've heard feedback on are one, seeing where we can help with some of the ideas for the boat launch grant and what the needs are there. And then I also heard other ideas, which I'd love to, since we can all be in the room now, just see if it's possible to have a quick discussion on other ideas from Eric or members of the board on where you think promising places to spend our time would be.
Put me on the spot.
Yeah, I know. Well, I know you have some ideas of like where it might make sense for us to spend our attention.
Well, so something coming down the pike, the city put in the budget for both the general fund and for the harbor fund, funding to do capital needs assessment on our capital facilities. It's out to RFP right now. It's out to bid for consultants to come in and do that. So there's going to be a significant harbor element of that. I think about half the funding was aimed at harbor. So we'll obviously be starting with the capital spreadsheets that we have and the information we have and feeding that to those consultants. So I think that could be an area where there could have some value of the committee, subcommittee, or ad hoc committee, helping reground truth that information, but also get it in a efficient and usable form to the consultant, whoever that is. I'm assuming it's probably going to be an engineering firm of some sort. That's typically who does that stuff. So being involved in that, some meetings and get-togethers with the engineering folks and making sure we're giving them good information. So I can see that coming up. But it's probably out to bid for maybe 45 days, I would guess. So, sometime in September that might be coming in, an award of the contract, and then they'll start in on it. I think what the intent is to have the report done, to bring it back to the city council during budget time next year, because that's obviously, the needs assessment is going to have a cost with it, and then you got to decide if we're going to start spending money on these things. So that's probably about the timing on that. So I'd foresee that coming up this fall. So that's probably a good place. The launch ramp grant we talked about, we're got an engineering team right now starting to put together some information on that, and got to get them under contract and get that going so they can do that analysis. So I'll probably pull the committee into that as well. That's kind of a combo thing. That's sort of a marine services and a financial element to it. So maybe both those ad hoc committees can help work on that.
Great. Cal?
Probably more towards Eric. A couple questions. I think it was at the June meeting you mentioned there was some money that was being allocated from our Congressperson Carbajal for the T-Pier. Is that still looming out there?
Yeah, we made a request, a congressional request. Of our congressmen and our senators, the quote-unquote earmarks are back. They gave it a different name, but it's basically, each congressperson and senator, they get a certain number of projects or amount of funding that they can do earmarks for, and they reach out to their constituents, and it's amongst their whole area, obviously. But Congressman Carbajal, we requested $3.8 million for a major rebuild of the North T Pier, major structural work, pilings, obviously all the timbers and decking and whatnot, and also replacement of all the utilities, the fire suppression system. They're all very old. It's gotten kind of getting to the point where it's past the point of replacing things when they rust through, because you pull one thing off and the next thing falls apart. So it's really time to replace all that stuff. And then replace our slips down that serve the Harbor Patrol boats as well. And like I said, that was about $3.8 million, I think was our estimate on that. And Congressman Carbajal picked up 1.5 of it and put it into the budget. It survived all of the House budget subcommittee meetings so far. I don't know if it's out of the House and to the Senate yet, so it's got to survive the Senate, typical federal budget making. But so far it looks like it's doing good, and so the 1.5 will, obviously won't do the whole project as we envisioned, but it should do a pretty good chunk of it. So if granted, then we're really going to have to look closely at what the needs are and prioritize. We've got an idea what we think what the priorities are. So we'll just see how that comes out. Federal budget, as you know, the fiscal year starts October 1. They're working on it now, and then it'll probably, if it's on time and doesn't go to a continuing resolution, a CR, which it might, we'll see. We should start seeing that about any time here, start getting public. So cross your fingers on that.
And then I have a second, kind of along the, actually two more. I think it's Measure B. That's the parcel tax. Is that still going to be on the ballot this November, which is the harbor fund?
Yes, the city attorney did his impartial analysis, which is published on the city's website. The arguments for and against were published on the city's website, and then the arguments in rebuttal to the for and against arguments have been done and published. So that's all on the city's website and slated to go on the November ballot.
Okay, great. So yeah, I don't want to count your chickens before they hatch, but that should help. And then one last question. I know when Mary and I first got on the finance committee, there was one of the grants that we were looking for that was infrastructure. I think at the time we were looking for the seawall along the rock. And the advice we got that as long as we could tie it to some sort of like emergency access or things along those lines. So we talked about maybe the seawall down by the Morro Bay Inn, but that wasn't a good fit. Is that something that's still something we should still pursue?
Well, I think they're always worth pursuing, and I think that the one we looked at, correct me if I'm wrong, Mary, we ran into a timeline and a matching funding issue. We had a number associated with it, and then we spoke to the grant manager, and I think it was in DBW, and we needed to have, I don't remember what the percentage was. It was a pretty significant percentage of matching funding.
So if Measure B passed, would that be a good source of matching funds?
Potentially.
Okay.
But and I think, matching funds and staff capacity, just to put this stuff together and send it in. You need city engineers' input and other folks' input. So I think we ran into challenges there too.
I think we should get the grant writers from the Morro NEP there. They got $4 million. All right, thank you, Eric. That's all the further questions I have.
Okay, any questions? Okay.
Eric, this might be kind of dumb because I haven't been, I've been at recess. This study that's going to be done, is this going to encompass and prioritize like the docks and the bathroom and the ice machine and things like that, or?
Well, it's a needs assessment. I'm assuming it's going to look at condition, and it'll have some kind of rating to it. Like I said, typically it's an engineering firm that does that. It's engineers, and they'll assign some sort of a rating or condition to it that, whether it's color-coded or prioritize one through whatever, I'm not sure. But yes, I would anticipate it's going to have a prioritization to it from their standpoint, from an engineering standpoint.
Okay, not from a fishwife standpoint.
Then we'll take it and decide what the priorities are from there.
Okay.
Any other members? Chris, are you? No? Okay. I have I kind of wanted an update. I know that didn't City of Morro Bay hire a specific new employee to go for grants, or at least spend more of their time on grants writing?
I think that is something the city's working on, but I'm not sure if that has come to fruition.
Okay. And then does anybody have any updates in regards to the grant that they were going for Coleman Park? I
haven't heard anything new on that.
Haven't heard anything about that. Okay. Just wanted to know if there was any updates on that. Okay. I'm seeing no more questions from the board. I'm going to open it up for public comment. Seeing none in our audience. Highland, do we have anybody online?
Thank you, Chair. We've got a raised hand from Sean Green.
All right, here we go. Sean?
I just wanted to say thank you to Harbor Director Endersby and to Congressman Carbajal. This money exists out there, and it really takes squeaky wheels to go for it. And it looks like we're in decent shape at maybe getting this huge chunk of money for a major project that's like a top 5 project on our list. I know Public Works Director Qualick's gone after some money for Coleman Beach. Between Mary, Cal, and myself, we've got some firepower. We can go after some of this money, once we handpick the 1, 2, or 3 big projects that we want to work on. So it's just a thank you to the people that are involved, and a plug for everyone to push for this kind of thing to continue happening.
Thank you for that public comment. Highland, anybody else in the queue?
Thank you, Chair. We have no more raised hands in the queue.
All right. Would anybody like to, I'll make a motion to accept the update
I'll second
for
that.
budget. All right, perfect. And Endersby, would you like to do a vote?
I would, Mary. Member Witowski,
Yes.
Member Vale,
Yes.
Member French,
Yes.
Chair Henson,
Yes.
Member Myers,
Yes.
Member Dowdy.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Moving on to agenda number B4, Harbor Advisory Board Member Public Engagement Outreach Assignment Reporting. So with this one, I'm just going to start off with Member Witkowski and move down the line.
I don't have any updates from my outreach groups.
Member Vale?
Nor do I.
Member French?
Jeremiah didn't give me anything, so I'm going to say no.
Okay. I'm next, but I did have a question. We have applicants going for the alternate for fishing. I was going to ask Jeremiah if he had anybody that he was thinking about. So according to Harbor Master Endersby, he said that nobody has put in applications that were due last week. And so the doors are still open if anybody wants to apply for next year's alternate for fishing harbor advisory board position.
Okay, while I was at recess, I just read those emails today.
All right, well then
I like
we
to be
say
right
that
on
you
top
still
of it.
have time to apply.
I thought I was on for a couple years for some reason.
No, we have two alternates to Jeremiah, to the member.
Okay, and it's
You're on
just me,
for
yeah.
Whatever your term is, there's still
Okay.
an open alternate seat that's this year, right now. There's several openings on some of the advisory bodies that the city clerk's been advertising for to try to get to fill, and the commercial fishing seat, second alternate, is one of those, and we haven't had anybody step forward yet, so.
It's because everybody's on the offshore wind, phone calls, meetings, et cetera, and meetinged out. I'm just guessing.
All right, so you are on for a couple more years, but if you know of anybody else who wants to apply for the alternate position, pass it on. So you have two, but you never have to make them.
How much entertainment do you want?
I like entertainment.
I mean, do you guys want crazy or do you want run of the mill?
We've had crazy.
Okay. All right. So anyway, to anyone who is out there with fishing experience who would like to be an alternate, you can still apply because we have an opening still available for that position. All right. My reporting for my outreach, I'm going to go just because I did already. Chamber. Morro Bay Chamber of Commerce is going to have a reinvented Margarita Avocado Festival. It's going to be September 9th through the 11th, a 3-day event. It's going to take place at both the Tidelands and the Rock. I think their plans are exceptional. It's utilizing some areas that are otherwise not maxed out and bringing people that are going to go all the way around Morro Bay and engage in the city in a much better, friendlier way. And it is concentrating on a healthy lifestyle, dedicating a lot of energy into food, family, music, and wellness. And if anybody wants to purchase a ticket, it's morrobaychamber.org. They're doing early buy, $59 for 3 days, and that gets you a Friday night movie night, and then otherwise it's $25 an adult per Saturday or per Sunday, and if you have a kid, it's one adult, you get a kid under 11 for free. So that is my chamber news, and with the schools, it's back to school already. I feel like the kind of commercials that come on in the middle of summer, and you're like, back to school closed? No. But anyway, August 18th, it just seems like it happened sooner, and on a Thursday of all things. So kids are going to be out there, be safe, and I'll get back in touch with them as far as any events that they could help with the harbor or the harbor can help with them. In the master leaseholders area, we have 2 new master leaseholders. We have Craig Schaefer down at Bayfront Marina, and he's already reached out to me. So he is new to the whole thing, so he's asked to have a little bit more of information from the Harbor Advisory Board. So if anybody wants to reach out to him, I know I'm going to meet with him at the end of this month. And then we also have a new owner for Port House. So the restaurant has been closed in the middle of summer, but he is going to be doing renovations. He owns Big Bubba's Barbecue and Tortilla Town, and he has stuff in Paso and in, I think, Santa Barbara too. And he just seems like he's a really creative guy. I'm really excited to meet with him. And he has sworn me to secrecy as to what he's putting in there, but what I like is that it's variety. It's something that's not already on the Embarcadero completely, and it will be a nice variety and a new place to eat on the Embarcadero. So great.
So gone are the $30 cocktails?
Were they $30 cocktails? I did see a sign, a sandwich board out in front when it was COVID of $2 margaritas, and I'm like, what? So I didn't experience the $30 ones, but yeah, gone is Port House and onward with Roger Sharp. Friends of Morro Bay Harbor, you mentioned the Measure B. They're working diligently on that. And like Eric, you said, that those comments from both parties are available on the website now, and the attorneys take out of that. Those are the end of my engagement outreach. Cal, would you like to go next?
Sure. I have just a couple, I don't know if this is exactly community outreach, but been liaising between the city and the liveaboard, specifically around the facilities for the restrooms and showers, and some of those people use those. I kind of got myself in too deep. It's really a public works issue, so I've been trying to get those people to work directly with Greg Wallach and those guys. I think kind of came to a head, I think about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I don't know, Eric, do you know if they actually met with those guys?
I do not.
Okay. Probably should go poke that bear again, I suppose. I feel bad for the guy. Some of the pictures he sent me of the cleanliness of the restroom was pretty unsettling. But it's a tough, because it is a public restroom. The other one, I had an opportunity, they had the battery plant environmental impact study here a few weeks ago. So it was ability to make comments and make sure that certain areas were addressed in the environmental impact study. Participated a little bit in that, and there was usual concerns about just placing, the batteries close to the water, especially because we're moving the sewer plant and it's kind of in the same location. But Scott Graham ran that study, and it was interesting to see the community outreach. I think 'cause there was a few folks here that were at that. The last one, you and I talked about it. I've done a little bit of research, the fresh off the boat to help support the fishermen, to see if I think the sardine can down there where the ice machine is was at one point a place for the fishermen to offload some subset of their fish to sell directly to the public. I talked to a few people that I know that fish. My neighbor fishes off a kayak, and it's a great idea, but there's some logistics issues with it. I got tied up in the technology side of it, which is, scan a QR code or something like that. But it's really the logistics of taking a subset of your catch and having somebody manage, selling it from a retail perspective. I don't know if Lori, if you had any input. I saw your.
Well, that was, it was Rob and Tiffany Sites. That was their facility for South Bay Wild. And they were trying to turn it into a fish market. And then Rob had issues with his quota. So they up and went to Oregon.
So it didn't go, but it wasn't related to that business concept. It was an external factor that they pulled out.
I'm sorry, what?
You were correct. It has to do with his quota,
Yeah, it was his quota.
not his permitting as far as planning and the city part, I believe.
There was a little bit of pushback, but that I think probably could have been overcome. But yeah, the final
It's
thing.
still sort of a somewhat of a viable idea from a fishing, I mean, it would make business sense for the fishing.
You mean to have like a small fish market like they do down in Avila where the fishermen can sell their products?
Yes.
I hadn't heard this, but this would be, it'd be bomb.
Okay.
It would be.
All right, well, then I will put it higher up on the list. So, yeah, so that's, again, I did a little bit of research to get on that and just wanted to float it here because I know there's a lot of people that have experience with it. So if it's worth pursuing, then I will continue on.
Just Port San Luis runs something like that a little bit. And the Central Coast Central Coast Women for Fisheries, I can say this, published when guys come in and are selling. And when fishermen sell off their boat, the fish has to be whole. But if it works in Port San Luis because the public can't get to their boats. So here, I don't know, that would be logistic. We can get to our boats. We can sell off the boat. But smaller kayaks and things like that, it would be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's some technology pieces of it, and of course, that's what makes me tick, but then it has to have the reality of, does it make sense for the fishermen?
I would put some feelers out. I would think there might be some guys that would be interested.
Okay.
I know the public would definitely be interested.
Yeah. But the demand is one issue, but then the supply is the other.
That's a whole nother subject.
Yeah. I don't want to go down that.
I'll shut my
path,
mic
but
off
yeah,
now.
Again, we'll maybe touch base offline and talk about it some more. So now you got me excited about it. Yeah, that's the end of my community outreach. Thank you.
Let's see. A couple of my outreach projects are the sport fishing business, and they're doing really well right now. There is some salmon outside, a little bit of halibut, and there's rumors of bluefin tuna offshore. And then whale watching is doing really well. And then as far as the mariculture part of it, the eelgrass is still just a big concern with these guys. It's tough to deal with all the eelgrass out there.
Okay, that concludes our outreach. And I think we answered questions well. But does anybody have any questions of anybody else's outreach? Nope. Then I'm going to open public comment. Highland, do we have anybody in the queue?
Thank you, Chair. We have no raised hands in the queue.
Where's Sean? Okay, so we will receive and file. I will make a motion to receive and file.
I'll second that.
All right, thank you.
All right,
Vote.
motion seconded. So, Member Witkowski,
Yes.
Member Vale,
Yes.
Member French,
Yes.
Chair Hansen,
Yes.
Member Myers,
Yes.
Member Dowdy.
Yes.
Passes. Thank you.
Okay, so our last agenda item, B5, which is Harbor Advisory Board input on new SCIF permit program implementation. This was led from Harbor Director Eric Endersby. So I turn it over to you.
Thank you. So I guess I'll just launch straight into the background. So we're looking for Harbor Advisory Board input, on a SCIF permitting program that we're implementing. We've got on the master fee schedule a new $100 a year fee for folks to keep their skiffs at certain areas that I'll fill in more a little bit here. Basically, it's all our skiffs that are behind Tidelands Dock, our fishing boat slips. There's not so much of them there except down the launch ramps, pretty crowded, but the ones down at Dune Street and up at Beach Street, there's not really anything there. The street end docks, and then like I said, Tidelands Dock and the launch ramp is where most of them are stored, and then the ones down at, in the staff report I call Oyster Beach. It's the little beach below Bayshore Bluffs Park, that little condominium place down at the south end of town. We've got about 75, what I'm just calling skiffs, which is generic for skiffs, dinghies, tenders, rowboats, kayaks, canoes. People use all those sorts of different craft for roughly the same purpose. About 75 of them behind our docks, and there's about 175 down on Oyster Beach. The ones that behind our docks are primarily, the docks per current harbor rules and regulations are supposed to be for tenders or skiffs serving boats out on moorings. Most of them are, but as time goes on, others sort of slip in. People bring their boats from uptown and wherever else because they want to keep a boat in the water, and so it's a constant kind of enforcement and management nightmare because it's a limited space. But they're supposed to be primarily for the liveaboards and people that need to get out to their moorings. Obviously, you got to get out there somehow. So most everybody, has a skiff somewhere. And then there's the 175 down on Oyster Beach, which are primarily canoes and kayaks. People just storing them down there. There's, obviously the mooring field down there as well that folks have their boats. Some of them, they just keep them in the water, tied to a line or something. But then a lot of them are pulled up onto what's left of the beach. There's been a lot of erosion there. And so, the volume has increased over time. More and more people, both living on their boats and accessing their boats with their skiffs, but also down on Oyster Beach. It takes an inordinate amount of our time to manage those, especially down at Oyster Beach, the annual cleanups we have to do. And unfortunately, like most things, when you provide something for free, while there's people that I think take good advantage of it, for the reasons that it's there's those that take advantage of it for not so good reasons, and things get overtaken advantage of, and it's become kind of a management nightmare. We really don't have any revenue source, direct revenue source for those that are causing those impacts. There's wear and tear on the docks. There's, like I say, there's the overcrowding. We've often got to try and figure out, whose skiffs belong to what moored boats, and try and get the owners to mark them in some way so that we can identify them and not tow them off. So it's a pretty constant battle to deal with those. So we instituted a fee to put in a management program with the fee to fund the program for us to be able to police it and clean up, and repair and do all the things associated with what happens down there. It's similar to pretty much every other harbor and marina that you go look around and up and down the coast. Port San Luis has a similar program. In fact, the sticker we using for the idea we got from Port San Luis and what they're doing, Santa Barbara's got something similar. They're all fee-based, very commonly done. So we're looking for board input on how to implement. Factor down at Oyster Beach is not just the mooring folks that need their skiffs. Like I say, some people use kayaks and canoes, but also just public access. Those stairs were built in down there, for a couple of reasons. One, for I think probably to help folks get down there that need to get to their moorings, but also just for general public access. It's a public beach, and that beach is in the little bluff area there above the water is so overcrowded now with boats that you can barely even walk through there. So it's become an issue. So we're just trying to figure out how to best manage it while still providing some public access, and allowing people to have vessels down there. So current harbor rules and regulations address it in a way. They basically say the docks, the city docks, the head float areas behind the docks between the dock and land is to primarily for skiffs and such that serve moored vessels. And then years ago, probably 20 years ago, we instituted this $1 a day fee program where others could put their skiff down there. And it turned into a management nightmare in that we had to go check on those boats on a regular basis and then bill them. And it wasn't the idea was good, but it was more time and effort to manage it than we ever made revenue out of it, so it really didn't serve its purpose. So, our harbor rules and regulations would have to be changed. And we get some overflow from boats coming out of, Yacht Club and Marina Square. Our current rules and regulations say that those areas are to be used for moorings that are in non-commercial mooring zones. We have 2 commercial mooring zones. One is Marina Squares. They have a block of 25. And Moore Bay Yacht Club has a block of 25. and those vessels are really should be using the adjacent lease site that manages those mooring areas, and so we get some spillover coming from the north into our area that takes up our valuable space. So rules and regulations have to be changed for that. And our rules and regulations really are mute on Oyster Beach. Says anything about it at all. There's nothing there at all. And so we're looking to try and get some form of organization and regulation down there, just because it's gotten out of hand and something needs to be done. The cost of dealing with it, pollution, stuff gets dumped down there. People leave tarps forever, and the plastic deteriorates, and the plastic's going off into the bay. I mean, it's not a good situation. It needs to be fixed. So we're looking for some Harbor Advisory Board input on how to help us manage it. So I've kind of got 4 questions in the staff report for the Harbor Advisory Board. One is the definition of a skiff. We looked at this years ago. Gene, you probably were the only one here that would remember. And we kind of landed on 12 foot as being what the maximum length of a skiff. We've gone around and looked and seen what people are using now, and things have gotten a little bigger. You've got to be careful to not get a full-blown boat back in there, and so. But a lot of people use engines and small motors, and so we think 14 feet might be a little more appropriate. We don't think that would have an unnecessary burden on the space available. But we want to get some Harbor Advisory Board input on that. Should the city's dock spaces continue to be utilized by boats that are primarily serving moorings, and then others on an as-available basis, which is pretty much how we do it now? That's our recommendation, that the moored vessels have first priority for that space access, and if there's extra room, then others can get a vessel in there as well. And then since space is limited, we're going to have some sort of limits established. What we're recommending is 1 skiff permit per moored vessel on the bay. Whether the moored vessel is the mooring owner or somebody renting really doesn't matter. It's just 1 per boat that's moored out there. And then also recommending that moored vessels with valid liveaboard permits can get 1 skiff per person listed on the liveaboard permit. We have a fair amount of couples out there, and they have 2 skiffs because it's like you have 2 cars when you're a couple, and so a lot of people have 2 skiffs. And recommending that they get 1 of those permits for free because they're liveaboards and they have a permit and they're doing the right thing, so kind of an incentive to do that. And then again, other skiffs be permitted on an as-available basis, spaces available basis if we have the extra space. And then again, down on the Oyster Beach area, I think our main question is, aside from the moored vessel skiffs, should we continue to allow other skiffs to be stored down there via this permit system? Some sort of limit's going to have to be put on it. I don't know what that limit is. The beach area is eroding away. The bluff area is eroding away. So at some point, we're probably not going to have much space left. But there still is some flat areas. So the question is, do we still allow skiffs? Like I say, most of them canoes and kayaks down there now. But do we still allow that via permit system? Because we've got to somehow get a handle on it. So we're looking for Harbor Advisory Board's input. We've got some photos in there, mostly of Oyster Beach. I think the ones behind the docks, I don't think any photos need to be taken there. It's pretty straightforward. They're just, the skiffs behind the docks and the spaces there is the space there. A little more dramatic down at Oyster Beach, so we're looking for a little Harbor Advisory Board input. Estimated revenues out of this, if we start limiting what happens down at Oyster Beach, we suspect a lot of people will just start taking them home. Some of the stuff is I'm sure nobody's going to claim it. There's a lot of boats that are just unseaworthy junk. And I think a lot of people put their kayaks down there because they're tired of storing them in their backyard or their side yard or their garage, and that's a convenient place. It really ought to be for people that use the water and access the water. And I went down there today with my Harbor Patrol supervisor, and there were some that were absolutely overgrown with plants, and who knows how long it's been since they've moved. So. And then there's all the ones that are stored under those stairs, and the public works folks need to get in there and do maintenance, and they can't when those things are in there. So it's just become just needs to be culled out, and we got to figure out how to clean things up and manage it going forward. So, we're not estimating this as some giant revenue source. We're not in it to make money to try and find some new profit center. We're just trying to find some way to to put a system in place to manage it and make it a little more enjoyable for all and usable for all, and identify some revenues that would help pay for that management. So that's where we're at with it. I guess I can open up to any questions, and then we can go to any public comment, and then go into discussion and do the normal thing. So any questions?
So yeah, I was gonna do it in that manner, and then at the end, during the discussion portion, get you yes or no's to your recommendation with, or alternate recommendation, or your recommendation with other details. So let's start with questions. Want to start over with Jean?
Okay.
Member Dowdy?
Initially when Harbor Department and the Harbor Advisory Board were talking about skiffs and tenders, we more or less lumped all the tenders and the skiffs behind the head floats in the same boat. Some of the tenders are a little larger than 14 feet, so maybe those can be addressed on a case-by-case basis by the harbor director. And then as far as the fees, would they go to the boat owner or would they go to the mooring owner?
Whoever has the permit for the skiff itself. And we would be making sure that matches up with the boat. And then if there's extra space, and we do allow others, that aren't mooring, don't have boats on moorings, then we match that up to whoever that person is.
Okay, I think that answers the question. There's about 125 moorings that are not on the yacht clubs and more marinas. There's about 150 moorings in the bay, and about 50 of those are where the large spots are. So we're really just talking about the public docks. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think most of the tenders for the moored boats are Tidelands and Launch Ramp.
Yeah.
And if they'll say the one down at Bayshore Bluffs and A2 or more on the Oyster Beach, there's a couple up at the street end docks,
Right.
AP,
Okay.
but not many. The vast majority are Tidelands and Launch Ramp. And there's like I say, there's 125 odd moorings. We did a rough count a couple of weeks ago, and 75 is what I came up with at those docks. So obviously not everybody has a tender that they keep down in the water. Some people bring them from home.
Right. In the past, it was a requirement that you put your mooring number on the skiff if you had it tied up at the public dock there. And we were under the impression that those would just be for boat owners. I guess I looked at you the other day working on one of the docks there, and maybe 1 out of 20 had a number on it. And maybe that could be implemented to help establish you as a mooring, a skiff that's allowed or not.
Well, in a permit system, you come purchase a permit, and we identify your boat and your mooring number. You're right. We've typically asked people to put their mooring number on there, and which works for folks that have moorings. But then there's always been some that game the system that put a mooring number on there, and they're not the mooring. They don't have a boat. They put a mooring number on there because they know how the system works.
Oh, well.
And we have no real way of policing that without spending a ton of time on it.
It seems to me like we have two really separate problems here. One is the Oyster Beach, and then the other is the impact of the additional skiffs behind the head floats there. I don't know quite how you handle the Oyster Beach. I go by it almost every day in the skiff, and it's colorful. That's about all I can say.
Makes a good picture.
But we'll work on it.
Beck and I were talking about that. It's definitely a painting subject that would be very colorful.
Sounds like the parking problems, Eric. Couple questions. So I'm assuming that if you went to stickers, there'd be like tiered type of things. If you had a skiff or if you just had a kayak, it would be different. You could maybe park your skiff different places or tie up, I guess.
Well, we're trying to keep it as simple as possible.
Okay.
A one sticker system,
Sure.
Like I say, we'll track it administratively back in the office, the name and who gets the sticker number and sort of thing. So, kind of like our launch ramp parking stickers, they've got a number, and we know who that's assigned to, and we get a license plate, similar kind of deal. So, and that way, it's a consistent thing. We'll require that it be placed in a consistent place on all the vessels, so that it's a quick check.
Like the
and it's
CF
not,
number.
yeah, something like that. Something that makes it easy for us, time-wise, to manage.
All right. And then if I look at the kayaks, is the concept I could pay $100 a year to store my kayak down at Oyster Beach?
That's a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, similar. Yeah, same concept.
Would there be any infrastructure, capital projects, I guess is the best way to put it? If I'm going to pay $100, am I going to have like a rack to store it, like you have like by the GAFCO, there's a big storage rack there.
We've been batting that around as well.
Okay.
Obviously, if you don't have anything like that, it's kind of one layer on the ground, and that's all you get. It limits it, how much you can get down there.
Sure.
Some people have built in their own racks down there, which is a problem.
Yeah.
So we've talked about, should we provide some sort of basic rack system, and
Sure.
then that becomes the limit. Okay, what fits in there is it.
And then there would be a cap on the number of permits.
I think there's going to have to be. I mean, it can't be unlimited, because it's right now. You just try and walk down there. I mean, you can't.
Yeah.
Can't
Los
walk down there
Osos
and go to
has
the
a
beach.
similar spot down there where there's a gazillion.
Oh, back in
Yeah. Another fee reports. Yeah, I did get a little bit of feedback from actually Greg Anderson. Mentioned it to him earlier this evening, and he was like, "Yeah, at least him personally thought it was a great idea, especially if there's as a live aboard, you get one skiff for free kind of thing. It would be definitely palatable, but if it could free up the tie-up area, he would be supportive. We'll probably get some more feedback over the next week or so of some of the other folks." That's all the questions I have, Cherise.
I guess I'm going to go next. Okay, so I have a couple questions. Enforcement. So what would generate what I'm assuming would be a ticket if they don't have this? What would that look like? If somebody doesn't have this permit, would it only be a penalty that's higher than the annual if it was floating, or what would be the penalty and the enforcement if they didn't get this permit?
Well, like all enforcement issues, I think we'd take it on a sort of a tiered approach. We wouldn't just go straight to tickets. I think you try and identify who it is. If somebody doesn't have a permit or a sticker, you have to try and identify who the boat is, and typically on those sorts of things, in the past, what we've done now, we posted signs and said, okay, everybody, you need to get your mooring numbers on your boat and identify them, and those that don't are going to get taken away. And so we've typically done it that way. We would try and identify who it is first, and get them. If there's space, if it's not a mooring, if it's a mooring person with a moored boat, they should take care of it and get it done, and there'd be no question they could get a permit. If it's somebody else that just wants to store their boat down there that's not a mooring holder, we'd have to try and identify them and get them to come in and get a permit and come into the fold. And if they didn't, probably impound. We have to rewrite the rules and regulations for this. Probably impound the boat. Writing an administrative citation is always an option. So either pathway, but we always try and take the softer approach first and get voluntary compliance before you go for the throat.
What about all of the people who, I'm just wondering, when would these tickets or anything enforcement-wise take place? Because you are having transient kayaks and things that would fall under this that would have no idea that they were supposed to have a permit. So the enforcement would only happen if they were using a city dock or parked in Oyster Beach for an extended period of time? Or what would be the criteria that would warrant a ticket so it would be obvious who and when you would get a ticket if you didn't have this permit?
Well, implementation obviously is going to take some time. We would intend to implement on the docks first, because there's not that many non-mooring people there. There's a lot. Oyster Beach is, vast majority of them are people that are on moorings. The dock ones would be a little simpler, and we'd implement those first and get the system up and running. And then Oyster Beach obviously is going to take a pretty robust notification process, let people know, let them get a chance to take it. Like I said, I think a number of them are going to take them out of there. Some people just just left them down there, and they probably don't even know they're there. They don't care they're there anymore. We'll end up having to dispose of them, but give everybody a chance to come and claim their stuff, and then we'll get everything cleaned up and kind of do a reset and start over. From an enforcement standpoint, like I said, we would try to identify folks first. Oyster Beach being sort of the largest management area to deal with, we have to, once we get established, and let's say there's X number of permits down there and then the boats are stored, periodically go through and identify and make sure everyone's got a permit. And if somebody doesn't, then we'd go through the same routine of trying to identify them, get them to get a permit if there's space available, and take it from there. And if they don't, comply. Typically what we've done with cleanups down there in the past is we drag them all down to our yard and store them until somebody either comes to claim them, and if they don't, then we end up putting them in our auction or the yard sale, the swap meet, something like that, public sale.
So the majority of these are locked somehow, or so
some of them are locked. Some people have locked them to trees. Some people, and even down in the docks, some people that have boats out on moorings, but they're not liveaboards. They're not going out there super often. They'll lock their boat to the dock, to the little rail on the dock, just to make sure it doesn't go away, which is fine. It's not a big deal. But down Oyster Beach, some people lock them to trees, or lock them to the stairs, or lock them to each other, lock them to a big bush. I mean, there's just everything down there.
Then my other thing was about, you at the beginning said that $100 per year, and that approximately 25,000, which means 250 permits. The other part that about the 25,000, when you did the cost assessment of time that was spent on harbor staff doing this type of item, is that what it penciled out to be? Is typically about $25,000 a year of maintenance and time spent on these?
Well, I think that my estimate on 25,000 was based on if everybody got a permit. That's the 75 odd at our docks, and then the 175 down at Bay Shores. Like I said, I think a number of people are going to either not be no-show and just because they've abandoned them, or some people are going to take them home because they're not going to want to pay a fee. So we're estimating a lot lower usage of that and a lot lower revenue.
You walked it back to 10 grand at the end of that paragraph.
Yeah, I'm probably more down to 10 grand, which is 100 boats, 75 maybe on our docks, and 25 down at Oyster Beach or so, maybe more. I mean, that's probably the low end estimate. We base the fee both on some estimated costs and also looking what other folks are doing up and down the coast from a permitting standpoint that have a permit system.
And what's the process to remove the abandoned boats? You just break the lock, or do you give like a certain amount of time where you have put a sign on the boat that says this is going to be taken away? What's the typical process of what is not getting any response for the permit?
Yeah, we'll put, you're talking about initially or once things are established?
Well, I'd assume that you've probably taken away some abandoned boats before. I'm just wondering what the general process is of trying to locate the owner before you take it and sell it.
We generally will post down on the docks. We'll put notice on the gangways, down on the docks, and that's our primary methodology. And word of mouth as well. We'll ask people, because folks that live on their boats are down there all the time. Sometimes you can ask, whose skiff is that, and they might know. And so we'll try and do some outreach that way. But we always try and do a maximum amount of outreach first and identify people before we take any sort of action, whether it's impounding them or citing them or taking them away.
All right, I think that is it for my question.
I just happen to have my skiff locker rent for Avila right here. I know. I think it's totally reasonable to charge for the moorings. Charge for one boat. The second boat is okay if there's two people on it. And yes, it should be mandatory marking. There's been boats or skiffs or whatever in front of our boats for years, and I've never seen anybody in them. Never. I'm sure, I'm not down there all the time, but I'm sure they move, but it's like, some of them look like they need to be dumped. Oyster Beach, I am 195% for making a storage rack, and that rack's going to cost you X amount of money for the year. Once that rack is full, that's it. If there's room, because I haven't been down there lately either. Our quarterly skiff rack for rack number 31 down in Avila is $69 a quarter. And I don't even know if we have a skiff in there, to tell you the truth. I need to check that one. That's Avila. That's a going rate. So what you're asking is not unreasonable at all. So I stand behind you on 100% on that one. Yeah,
for storage. I mean, it's one thing to tie up; it's another thing to have a rack built on the shore. Dry storage, basically.
Yeah, well, the one in Avila, it's a fenced-in enclosure, and there's racks, and those are skiffs to getting out.
Sure.
To the commercial boats, and they have skiffs tied up down at the bottom. But for kayaks and stuff like that, it's just like, come on, people. If you want a place and it's somewhat secured, pay for it. It's what the rest of the world does.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be quiet now.
Member Vail?
I'm all for it. It seems to me oyster might be the biggest problem. This will straighten that out. And then the incidentals, hiding behind this dock or that dock that aren't liveaboards or aren't paying, weed them out. Although, certain beautiful photographs won't get taken. And the people with kayaks and canoes, come on, they're the most portable things in the world. And that's just lazy, in a sense, leaving them taking up space on the waterfront. So I'm a yes on this.
That is, unless I decide to move my kayak down to the Langosta, and then I want an exemption.
Okay. Member Witkowski?
Yeah, I had two comments on this. The first, generally I'm on board. I think we should 100% charge and enforce aggressively. As a counter to that, I just wanted to ask, and one input I would have is maybe there's a low income way that people who have existing kayaks there who are low income might be able to fill out some sort of paperwork to request like a reduced rate or to continue putting it there for free, just to make that option available for people who might need that. And then the only other comment that I had is I think number 4 to me, and putting a limit on the number of skiffs, seems like something that you could punt down the road after you had aggressively enforced and seen kind of like what the steady population was of people who were actually interested. Then I think you could reevaluate what that number was and see if it was sustainable and you wanted to cap it at that or create a little bit of wiggle room and kind of tackle that limit number after you had gotten the enforcement under your belt and seen what the remaining population was.
Okay, okay, Dowdy.
Yeah, I'd like to add a couple more comments here if I can. In the past, the mooring owners were allowed one skiff to be tied up behind the head floats. That was part of their mooring fee, was to allow them to have one skiff. And then as far as building racks, having built 2 or 3 of them along the Embarcadero here, it's not going to be as easy as we just say, we'll just build some racks. There's going to be some structural problems. There's going to be some handicap or accessibility problems. So it's going to be a little more technical and challenging than we just say, oh, we'll just build some racks and stick them down there. So those are my comments.
Okay, so I'm going to open that to public comment, and then we'll come back and we'll look at items 1, 2, 3, and 4 and decide yes or no, and then if we want to make any additions or deletions. So I'm going to open public comment right now, and we have someone in the audience. Betty Winholtz.
Yes, my name's Betty Winholtz, and Bayshore Bluffs, where the Oyster Beach is actually my neighborhood. And so I want to comment on that. I've been down there many a time, and if you haven't, be sure and wear not good shoes. It's very slippery because of all the muddy, slimy stuff that's down there. As well, it's also very sharp because of all the broken shells. And the beach does not exist in high tide. It exists when the tide's out. And so it's very narrow, and there are several trees that have fallen. And so you can only really utilize one part as it goes towards that marina. So my point would be, I'm not sure that the public really accesses that and that anymore, because it doesn't really exist anymore. And my second concern would be charging a fee when you're not getting anything for it. So you might clean up that area and get rid of the old stuff, but what are you doing to offer as a service in exchange for my paying my $100? I would think if you're going to charge me something, I should get something for it. And maybe you're just saying that you just get a space, that from now on we're just charging spaces. And that's a policy change. You've all asked really good questions. I just want to thank you for all the good questions that you've asked, because some of those were my questions. But I just wanted to offer you that feedback that, one, it's barely a beach. It's not easy to walk on. And if you're going to charge, what's going to be the benefit? Maybe it'll be the racks, or maybe it'll be something else. But thank you.
Thank you, Betty.
All right, Highland, do we have anybody in the queue online?
Thank you, Chair. We have no raised hands in the queue.
All right, thank you. All right, so we're going to bring this to item number 1, definition of a skiff. So does anybody make a motion to accept this as is, or does anybody have any questions before we make? Oh, wait, go ahead.
Is the expectation that we'll make recommendations here, or is it something that we would research more? Or can we make those decisions here today? Is that what you would look
Yeah,
for?
I'm looking for recommendations and input, any other input you might have.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Okay, so does anybody make a motion to accept the definition of a skiff as stated in number 1?
I so move.
Sorry, as a leftover.
And I'll second. So do you want to make a vote? Oh, discussion before a vote? We had the discussion. Okay. Oh, we did. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I would think that some skiffs are larger than 14, and I would think that that would be up to the harbor director to make that those exceptions or allowable.
The motion to accept it and then allow exceptions based on the harbor.
Yeah,
Based on
14,
harbor.
unless you get the harbor
Okay.
director to-
Okay, so we have to, that would be an amendment to the one that we just motioned and seconded. And so we would have to have a vote on that. And if it was no, then we could come back to add that as an addendum, correct, Eric?
Or can we enhance?
Or change the motion altogether?
Yeah, you can entertain a friendly amendment, and as long as the motion is
Okay.
changed and the second is okay with it, seconder's okay with it, then you can change it.
Second this?
I did. Okay, so
Okay,
let me write
second.
this down. What is it that we're
We have
saying
another
differently?
comment from Member Vale.
Okay.
Yeah, I would amend my motion for the exception
Okay. With
and
the
just keep it in
exception.
one rabbit hole.
With the exception, and say it again, but Dowdy, how did you, Jean, did you say that there could be some that are larger than that?
Yeah, it would be fair for the harbor director to allow those to be considered a skiff or tender.
And so who made the second?
I made the second, but I'm writing it down because Lori's not here.
Okay.
To allow
So if you're okay with the change
with
as
the
the seconder,
exception that.
go ahead with it.
Okay. Okay, I'm okay with that. So we need to take a vote.
Call the question?
We made the motion,
And it was seconded.
seconded.
Yep.
Member,
Hanson,
And you got a friendly amendment?
yes,
Is okay?
yes.
Okay.
So now we need to make a vote, right?
Yeah, if you're
Okay.
done discussing.
We're done with the discussion.
Okay. Check. All right.
I feel like a muppet up here.
Member Witkowski.
Yes.
Member Vale.
Yes.
Member French.
Yes.
Member Hanson.
Yes.
Member Myers.
yes.
Member Dowdy.
Yes.
All right, passes unanimously. Thank you.
Moving on to number 2, should the city's various city docks and other spaces utilized by skiffs continue to be primarily for the use of skiffs serving as tenders to moored vessels in non-commercial mooring areas and available to others on a space available basis as determined by the Harbor Department? Do we accept this as is?
Just one quick question on this. Is this, when we get into the kayaks, so kayaks are not skiffs?
We're lumping them all into the same because
Okay.
some people use kayaks and canoes as their skiffs or tenders.
Gotcha.
And as long as they're not, 18-foot long ones. they're-
Okay. So, but it's still tiered though. It's a skiff because you go back and forth with your boat.
It's your
But
means
this
of getting
doesn't
back and
address
forth
the
to your moored boat.
Morro Bay or the Oyster Bay clutter of abandoned kayaks down there. So there's two types of permits. There's one because you're a boat owner, and there's one you want to store it.
Same permit,
Same permit? Okay.
just moored boat owners get preference on the docks. And if space is available, others can utilize it. Oyster is a combo. I don't suspect we're going to have so many boats for the tenders for the moored boats down at Oyster Beach that there wouldn't be some space left over, depending on what
Okay.
space we turn over to this.
Maybe make it complicated. Thank you. I just wanted that clarity.
I would move if we accept point 2.
I'll second it.
Jean?
As I understand it, we're talking about the boat owners? Is that what Eric just said?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. And like I said earlier, that can be the mooring owner too, but not always, because, a lot of
That's
people rent
correct.
their moorings. It's the boat that's on the mooring, that person.
But we're talking about the boat owner then?
Yes.
That's fine.
Any other points? Okay. This motion has been stated and seconded as is. So Eric, would you like to do a?
Yes.
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 Okay, so number 3 is a multi-part. It has one skiff permit per moored vessel on the non-commercial mooring areas as previously discussed. So we're talking about priority, who gets them first. So first it's the one skiff, then it goes to C, which is other skiffs get that, but then the liveaboards get one for free. So let's have a discussion. Does anybody have any questions about how this is stated, or if they want to make any adjustments to this? I'll start with, yeah, okay.
This space is limited? Is there going to be a predefined number? I mean, you kind of mentioned that. Are you just going to kind of open it up and see where it lands?
I don't think we'll ever have a problem accommodating all the skiffs for moored vessels. That doesn't appear to have ever been a problem as long as everyone's got one skiff, which they generally do. Some liveaboards have a couple. Seems we have space for that, one per at this point. I don't anticipate that's going to change. It's all the other ones that filter in that start causing the crowding.
But that gives you enough leeway if we turn into be the kayak storage area of San Luis Obispo County, right?
Talking on the docks or down at Oyster Beach?
Oyster Beach. Like I said, I'm still kind of stuck on that. So those 100 kayaks down there, if we offer storage, are we going to, be in this kayak storage business? Is that covered in 4? Okay. Thank you, Eric.
On AB here, one skiff permit per moored vessel. B, moored vessels with valid liveaboard permits. And C, other skiffs may be permitted. Is that the status quo now?
Yeah, pretty much. We've typically not, depending on the when we've gone down and done sweeps and gone down to try and enforce. Sometimes we've been completely crowded and we have to get rid of the folks that aren't mooring holders, but generally the mooring holders can all fit down there. We've not, from a policy standpoint, allowed non-mooring holders to keep their skiffs down there now. It's less of an issue when there's less crowding because the mooring holder skiffs are not taking up all the space and there's extra space left over. But we require everybody to put their mooring number on there. So right now we don't really see officially, we're not allowing others to come down. But if we've got it on a permit basis and it's managed better and easier to manage and frees up some space, that there's no reason why we couldn't.
Right. So this does not, A, B, and C do not represent a change, more a continuation of existing policy.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I have another question as far as I guess not about A, so we can move on to B. And my question is about B, about the liveaboards. So if I'm reading this correctly, if they have a liveaboard permit, then they have a skiff. They need to pay for their first skiff, but their second skiff, if they have 2 people on the boat, is free?
No, just be one free. If you've got one skiff,
okay,
you get it for free.
And if they have 2 skiffs, it would be
free, you pay for one. And if you got 3 people on your permit and you need 3 skiffs, you can get 3 permits. 2 you're paying for.
Okay, so
we don't have many of those. I think we've historically had a couple liveaboards that have more than just a couple of man and woman. Some of them have kids, but usually they're 2 skiffs is the most.
Right.
We've had a couple that have had 3, but there's not many.
Okay.
Not been a problem.
And so they get a free one. Do you see any fallout from the liveaboards that are on, that don't have a skiff, that aren't on a mooring, having an issue with that?
Liveaboards and slips?
Yeah, liveaboards and slips, because they're paying the same amount. You see what I'm just seeing if there would be a problem with them thinking that, okay, well, I can be on a mooring, it's cheaper on a mooring, and then you don't charge me that, and then I'm on a slip. So anyway,
well, in a slip, they don't have a skiff stored anywhere.
Right. So
generally
it's just
speaking,
a non-issue, but it is a benefit that they don't get.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, just throwing that out there. Okay. Any other questions about B? Oh, Gene.
Yeah, I think this motion is a little muddled, but I'll go along with it. I think eventually it'll get cleared up.
We haven't made a motion yet. We've done a discussion. Okay, so what I feel like this 3 is that one is a prioritization of who gets the spot first, and then the second one is saying that the liveaboard gets a free skiff permit. Is that, you agree with that? One's prioritization of who gets the permits, and then we're also saying that the liveaboards on moorings get one free one.
Liveaboards can have multiples.
Okay.
And get one free.
So
That's B.
So what I propose as my motion, which is that skiff permits have a prioritization of first moored vessels in the non-commercial mooring areas. Then number 2, priority is liveaboards. And then 3, all the other ones in a as available basis. And I'm going to leave that motion as that and then do the liveaboard permit free as a second one, or should I include it in that?
It's up to you.
Okay, I'm going to just include it in that one, as well as liveaboards receive one permit. Liveaboards on moorings get one free skiff permit.
I mean, as a point of information, if you're a liveaboard on a mooring, by definition, you're a mooring holder, and so you're going to get that priority. Because you're a liveaboard doesn't make you any different as a mooring owner. You're still a mooring holder, not necessarily an owner. But so the fact that you're a liveaboard wouldn't give you any priority over the other person that isn't a liveaboard that has their boat on a mooring. You're the same. You're all getting first priority, first shot at it. It's the people that don't have boats on moorings.
Okay, so let me redo it.
I think you were fine.
Can I ask why we're redoing it? You're
well, nobody seconded it, so I can redo it.
Paraphrasing the same thing.
Okay, so I'm going to redo it. Just listen to me. It makes more sense. So prioritization is that non-commercial mooring vessels have first dibs on the skiff permit and everyone else on a space available basis. And secondly, that liveaboards receive one free skiff permit.
I think I can second that.
All right.
Okay, ready for a vote?
So a vote.
Who was the second? Okay, Cal. All right, let's take a vote. Go the opposite direction. Member Dowdy.
Aye.
Member Myers.
Yes.
Chair Hansen.
Yes.
Member French.
Yes.
Member Vale.
I'm so confused. Yes.
Member Witkowski.
Yes.
All right, that sounded unanimous.
Okay, so that wraps up business items. We have C, declaration of future agenda items.
Wait, sorry, did we get to number 4?
Haven't got number 4 yet.
Oh, no, I'm so confused.
Sorry, Charisse.
Oh, okay. Number 4, due to the sprawl, overcrowding, and vessels abandoned at Oyster Beach, should the overall number of skiffs be limited to some number that constrains them to a certain area, with the skiffs serving as tenders to moored vessels being given first priority? Discussion?
I think this goes back to one of the points we talked about earlier, and that Betty also brought up is what is that number if we are, and again, just talking specifically about Oyster Beach, if we say it, are we going to limit it to the racks that we put in there if that's even feasible? So that's kind of a tough nut to crack, and I almost think it'd be like a 2-step process, see how many ends up, and then maybe find some capital improvement to do for those people that want to pay that $100.
Yeah, we don't know what, gone looked down there, looked at it today. I couldn't say what a reasonable number might be that could potentially be stored down there and not be an overcrowded mess. It's tough to say. And then, like I say, you add the potential rack system, that changes things. So I think we would take it in a 2-tiered system, as kind of get everything cleaned up and cleaned out and see who's left.
Yeah.
And then we're going to have to figure out, okay, if we're still limited on space, but we got more demand, then what? Some kind of lottery system or something. So
It seems somewhat harsh because you're charging somebody, and then at some point in the future you may make the accommodations later.
I think we'd implement. We're going to have to figure out what the carrying capacity is, so to speak, before we institute any permits and start charging people. We'll have to just figure out what can reasonably go down there and what makes sense, and then carry it forward.
I think if you're going to build something, aren't you going to run into the Coastal Commission?
Yeah.
I think there's somebody out there that's, I mean, it's almost an environmental hazard, so it almost feels like it's an all or nothing. They're going to commit to building, 100 spaces or just disallow it completely.
Yeah, we just don't know what
To be honest, I'm
will be.
uncomfortable even making a motion on number 4 because I don't know if it's even a right thing to do to have kayaks down there, period.
I don't think we should let perfect be the enemy of good. I think if we start by implementing this fee schedule and tightening things up so that the people so that there's some funding to manage it, and with that, it's going to ideally be people who care, which are going to be newer kayaks, and so we won't have the rotting microplastics as much. And then I think from there we can see what's the actual interest of people who care enough to pay for that spot of land, and from there can reevaluate what a sustainable number is.
I'm with you. I'm just nervous about creating a unrealistic situation, right? If we say we'll charge you $100, but then we go to build racks, we maybe can't for a variety of reasons. And so now we've made this promise to somebody for $100 they can store their kayak down there. And it turns out we can't really do that.
Well, kayaks are already being stored down there without racks. So I think if we go in and say for $100 you get to have this spot of land to keep it, and you're supporting the administration to maintain this and make it something that's feasible for the city to offer. We don't promise anything about racks.
I don't think the city can sell lease that space to a person to store a kayak there. I'm not convinced that. I mean, does can the Harbor Patrol rent that space out?
Yeah, I mean, it's a master. It's
okay.
It's properties under our control, and you go through the process, and you have the master fee associated with it. The city council approves, the governing body approves, and you come up with a system to manage it. Yeah.
Eric, I have a question. The other 3 we've taken care of. This issue, would a month or 2 give you enough time to clean it up and assess going forward what you think you might want to do? Clean it up, get rid of the dead wood, and then we come back to a feasible plan? Does that make sense?
Probably going to be more than a month or 2 to get through that.
Yeah, I don't know your timeline. I'm just throwing that out there.
I kind of want to tackle the docks first and get that taken care of, and
Right.
get the system up and running, and get some experience with that before we go tackle Oyster Beach. We'll probably put notices out that hey, this is coming. Space is limited. There's going to be a fee. Just put the information out. Put it on the city's website. Facebook it, get as much information as we can out. And some of them are just, people are going to take them, and they're going to go away.
See, to me, that would be a reasonable thing. It's let's work on the docks first, and then notify the public that there's going to be changes coming down to Oyster Beach. And, derelict kayaks or whatever will be removed, or something like that. Public outreach. I think that would actually be best, just to two-prong it. That's just my opinion.
Okay, any more questions? Member Dowdy.
Yeah, it just gets more complicated than anybody thinks, There's been prescriptive rights there. People have been storing kayaks for 50 years there. So there's got to be some establishment. Also, anybody who rents the mooring, we pay a county possessory tax. So that might just get complicated also. So it's not going to be quite as easy. I like your suggestion that we, take one step at a time, sort of thing. The docks first, and then we address the Shell Beach later.
Yeah, I just got that bill in the mail too, the possessory tax for the boat. Thanks. Need to pay that one.
Chris
Okay, so,
had a question.
oh, yep, sorry, Chris. There you go.
I just feel there's a tendency to overcomplicate things. Number 4, should the overall number of skiffs be limited to some number that constrains them to certain areas? Yeah. I mean, what's the confusion? At some point, areas like Oyster and others need to be gauged that way so that people aren't piling their stuff on other people's stuff, stumbling, not being able to pass through, whatever it happens to be. So I don't think number 4, I think number 4 is fine. It's also something that the Harbor Department supports, and they're the people that are going to have to do the work. Whether they do it simultaneous with the docks or do it 6 months after the docks doesn't really matter. It needs to happen. Thank you.
Okay, so taking in what I think is majority of our recommendations, I would like to make a motion that HAB recommends do not limit number of permits until permit program has been implemented for at least 3 months and HAB has been updated on status of program.
I second.
Okay. So, a vote.
Any
Discussion?
other discussion?
Discussion again? Thought we did discussion.
Just a quick comment. This more or less is supports 4 the way you've stated it, correct?
No, it's actually no change. That we are the program will go into effect, and then at least 3 months goes by, and then get a status update, and then HAB will make the recommendation to limit the number according to staff or whoever makes that decision. The recommendation would be at that time, not right now.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Ready for a vote?
Discussion.
Member Dowdy?
Oh, wait. Discussion.
Aye.
Member Myers?
Yes.
Chair Hansen?
Yes.
Member French?
Yes.
Member Vale?
Yes.
Member Witkowski?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Future agenda items?
Yes, I'd like to propose a future agenda item under the umbrella of revenue generation, discussing using some degree of the transient occupancy tax generated on the waterfront to be transferred for use by the Harbor Fund.
I don't think we've actually put something on the agenda for quite some time. I don't know what the next step is.
Well, no, we got to think about it. So anybody, you got to vote on it.
I'd like
second.
to just, if there's support, to add it and have a discussion of that in the next meeting.
All right. So you got a second
I'll second.
from Jean.
Okay.
And I feel like I need to think about this before I
Eric, are we missing any steps to add?
So you don't need to vote on it. It doesn't need a motion in a second. Basically, the way future agenda works is somebody brings up an idea. If there's no support for it, it just dies. If there's support from one other member, it can move forward. But if it's just support from one other member, then, at least with the city council, then the person that brought up the idea is going to write the staff report and do the research for it. But if there's broader support, then it becomes a regular item.
Okay. And
So really, you need 2 or more in support.
and so what does that look like? We've never done that before. I mean, usually it's a vote, and then so.
Yeah, you can
Then
vote
no
on
vote?
it. It's just not necessary.
Well, I think we have support for more than 2 members on that one. 3 members, yeah.
The discussion is once it's on the agenda.
Yeah, so next month.
Yeah, this is just to put it on the agenda.
Yep. All right, Chairman.
Okay.
Are you good with that?
Yeah, I just don't know what because we have more support, we just put it, okay. I don't know what to do.
Well, you're good. You just, the
You're
future
good,
agenda
okay.
item got declared. I say it does not need to be voted on.
Okay. So it will be put into our discussion when we make the next agenda to make it an agenda item possibly for that next meeting.
Yeah, it goes on the list and then we discuss.
It's on the list.
It'll be
How and
B5.
All right. And I lost my little thing. Any other members who want to discuss a new future agenda item? Seeing none. All right. That's it, right? I lost my little sheet that tells me what to do. Adjournment. Thank you so much for joining us for the Harbor Advisory Board meeting August 4th. Thank you. Good night.